the first time I saw Alien, James,
Well,
is
there you go.
I was seventh. I would have been younger than Ethan. I would have been 11 or 12 because I was seventh grade,
My
and my
points
younger
entirely.
brothers went too. And my dad waited until my mom went out of town on a weekend church
Hello,
retreat. As soon as
hello.
mom was gone, he took us all to see Alien, and it was like my love of cinema was. I think I'd already loved
Well,
cinema at that point, but it was just like, wow, this is what stories are supposed to be.
okay. Now, I don't think Five Nights at Freddy's is going to have that kind of give Ethan that kind of epiphany. But by the same token, listen to what you're saying. I was way too young to see it when my mum went out of town. My dad took. I believe his mum is out of town right now.
To be in pictures, you're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Let's start talking. I wonder if I need a drink. Happy Halloween, by the way.
Happy Halloween to those that celebrate.
You're like pagan, aren't you? You should.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but also I think Halloween has become it's far more of an American thing than a British thing. I think in America they seem to go all out, and in the UK people are just like, oh yeah, right, that's today. Sure.
It's definitely picked up steam over the years. I mean, it was fairly big when I was a kid, but now it's become not unlike St. Patty's Day. When I was a kid, St. Patty's Day, yeah, it was, but now it's become a cultural institution. And I'm surprised how big it has become in Hong Kong over the years. In Hong Kong, it's become quite big.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it's always been a big deal in Lang Kwai Fong, in the bar district in Central, just because it's a good excuse to get everybody out, dressing up, in the party mood, as it were. But then in recent years, they've done what they also do on New Year's Eve, which is to pedestrianize that whole neighborhood. Because there are plenty of people that want to. Well, there are plenty of people they want out on the street drinking, but there are also plenty of people that they want to be able to walk through the neighborhood and look at all the people drinking. And so there's like always been two things going on. It's like the bars are all decorated for Halloween and people are there. Some are dressed up, some are not, but it's a good excuse to go out. And then there's the other people, families, tourists, whatever, who come and walk around Lang Kwai Fong at Halloween to look at the people
watch. Watch,
but in a kind of weird sort of sightseeing kind of way. And either way, it's an absolute nightmare. I used to live just off Lang Kwai Fong, and it was always an absolute nightmare because they pedestrianize the whole neighborhood and then turn it into a one-way system. So it's pedestrianized one way, and if you live in the wrong direction, they won't let you walk down the street the other way. And it's really frustrating.
And they've done that ever since 92, 93, when those 12 people died on New Year's Eve night, when everybody came out, got crushed. And those of you are not from Hong Kong, but it still kind of resonates 30 years later.
Well, it's very similar to what happened in Seoul just last. Was that New Year's Eve or something?
A year or two, 2 years ago. Yeah, it was very recent. Yeah. So they've been crowd controlling management ever since then, and that's why they have the one way.
Yes, absolutely, and that's all perfectly fine and very sensible. It's just the reality of it is that it's very inconvenient. But you dressed up, didn't you? You had a Halloween party, and you sent me your photos, and you were.
I did. I was Harry Potter. I'll insert picture here. Mawan, we do a big it's a big hoopla here on Mawan, and a few of the moms really go all out. I'd love to be able to take credit for a lot of it, but I just kind of volunteer, get asked, shanghaied, is that a term? I get roped in.
It means kidnapped, but yes, it's a term.
And asked to do one of the roles. And so I got to be Harry Potter, and it was great. And I said, well, I don't have a Harry Potter outfit. And he said, oh, we've got one for you. That's how together this group is. I said, I've got the glasses. I was going to say. And I think that's why I got the role. I think that the glasses won them over.
So that was one of the pre-designated characters that somebody could choose? Or
No, what it was they rented the whole clubhouse. It's enormous. If you rent out like the different sections, And so they had these escape rooms. So they had a party downstairs, and then the kids they had a big sorting ceremony. So the kids got all excited. They got put into Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. And then one at a time, they came up and they had these escape rooms with a story that they had to go through, ending up in the final escape room with me asking for their help. And they had to solve this kind of really cool puzzle that they'd set up with these pictures in the room and the profiles of the characters from the film. And I mean, the music's playing and wafting through, and they've got banners up everywhere with the house colors. And when they solve it, they get to open the safe, the case, and in it they have a wand, a spell, and essentially instructions that you're going to need this because evil is descending. And they're like, evil's descending, and then Voldemort comes rushing into the room, my friend Joe, and I'm like, quick, everybody, quick, use the spell. And they're all with wands, like luminous expelliarmus, and he's like, and the kids love it. And so it was good fun.
I think obviously, this is where it all comes from. It's for the kids. And I think if you're in a neighborhood or a community or whatever, where there are lots of kids and you have kids of your own, of course, who are still just about young enough to get into it.
Ethan's 12 and he is on the cusp.
He does. He looks right. Yeah. This time next year, he'll be like, no, I'm not doing it.
Oh no! Except for when candy's involved, then suddenly he becomes, free candy? Oh no, I'm still into it. So.
Well, that's understandable, but I think because I don't have kids or whatever, and you could hear them on Saturday night round the village where I live. There was a whole thing going on, but it's all pre-designated. Even like which houses they're going to go to and do trick or treat. So no one even comes to my front door to even ask for anything.
I wouldn't come to your front door.
I'm a scary old grouch or whatever.
That's the mean old white guy.
There's plenty of them around here.
Yeah, there are. Hong Kong's full of those guys.
Washed up old white men. Yeah, unfortunately so. Yeah. So it was going on here, but I just, for me, it was never a thing. As a kid. Or as an adult, so I'm not going to be one of these people who like puts a jack-o'-lantern in the window and has a big bowl full of candy ready and dress up. There are people I know who dress up and sit at home waiting for people to come and knock on their door. I'm just like, really?
When the kids, we did it a couple years ago. We had it all set up with webs when the kids would come in, and because we do a whole trick-or-treating thing afterwards, but because Tammy's out of town in the States, I being Harry Potter was all I could handle. So
this is it. If you're basically flying solo, you might as well get in the mixer and go all in, make yourself useful. Okay, so if yes, you've dressed up and you've done the whole trick or treat thing. Did you watch anything to get yourself in the Halloween mood? I know plenty of people who devote the entire month of October to only horror movies.
I was pleasantly surprised. I'm a big Dracula fan. I love well-made Dracula films. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Fright Night, which we reviewed last year. I love a well-done vampire genre. There's obviously really bad vampire films.
Oh, sure.
I'm not a big Twilight fan. I don't like my vampires to sparkle. So I was really excited to see The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which came out recently. And because the whole story of the Demeter and the traveling of Dracula from Romania to England is a tale unto itself. And it's been told a couple other times in the past as well as kind of a singular story. And so I was keen to watch it. And I sat down the other day and was able to view it. And I got to admit, have you seen it?
I have. It's out in cinemas here right now.
Yes.
So
I
went to see it last week. Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, you were just about to.
Yeah, I was kind of showing my hand in that I was disappointed by and large.
Okay.
I had a certain expectation. There were parts of the movie I did like, but I was trying to work afterwards kind of assess, why did it not fulfill my expectations? Why did it leave me wanting more? Why did I feel it was lacking? And it dawned on me that I don't know if you saw the Stephen Moffat version of Dracula that they made for Netflix maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, with Klaus
Bang, yeah, as
yeah,
Dracula.
Swedish guy, yeah.
And Danish, I believe. Danish. And might have to double check that. I think he's Danish.
The movie, because he's from the Square, right? And I know the movie's Swedish, but yes, okay.
In the second installment of that trilogy, it's basically the Last Voyage of the Demeter. It's the same story.
That's right. Yeah,
it's the whole. And I thought, why did I enjoy that so much more? And I rewatched it. In fact, I watched the rewatch of the whole trilogy. You asked what I've been watching. I rewatched the whole trilogy this week because I really enjoy.
You're right.
I really enjoy that trilogy. Okay, and I thought one of the reasons I enjoyed that so much more was Klaus Bang's Dracula is in human form most of the time. He engages with people. He's seductive. He's witty. He's charming. He's humorous. He's macabre. He is vicious. He is all of these things. Whereas in the Last Voyage of the Demeter, the vampire Dracula is essentially just a big giant bat. It's almost like watching Alien, but not done near as good as Alien. It's just a monster that's on a ship killing people one by one with not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. And we find in the course of time there was some rhyme or reason to it, but the lack of engagement, the lack of dialogue between Dracula and victims, when I watched Stephen Moffat's Dracula on the Demeter, there, when he's wooing the heiress lady and she wants to speak German. So he says, "Excuse me a moment." He goes and he kills the guy on deck that speaks German because he absorbs their qualities. And he comes back and if you remember, I forget the girl who plays the nun, but they have a kind of a secondary story where she's being drained and is in a dream sequence where they're playing chess. And there's just this witty dialogue that Stephen Moffat does so well back and forth. And she's kind of egging him on, going, "Really? You killed a guy just so you can impress somebody with your German?" And he's like, and it's those kinds of things that made it rewatchable for me. Whereas the Last Voyage of the Demeter, I will probably never watch again.
I think that's fair. I think I won't probably ever watch the Last Voyage of the Demeter again. I mean, however, I think, Stephen Moffat's version, and I'm kind of hesitant to compare the two really. Because that version takes so many liberties with the story, and does well, and does makes for a very sort of inventive reinterpretation. But what I kind of enjoyed about Last Voyage of the Demeter was how sort of faithful in spirit it tried to be with Stoker's book. I mean, because this it's not even a chapter. In the book. The captain's log is like 3 pages, and then there are articles in the Whitby News ahead of time. So in total, you're looking at probably 8 pages or 10 pages of the book in total. During which you don't really have any details beyond the fact that they set sail from Romania with all of these boxes that are being shipped to England. They didn't know what was in them, and then by the time the boat gets to Whitby, or it's supposed to be getting to London, but it sort of runs aground in Whitby and no one's left on it.
Right.
And that's all you know. And what I kind of appreciated was the creative license that this took, in as much as going, okay, well, let's run with that. And it's funny that you brought up Alien, because I came out of the film and I thought, that what I liked about it is it was essentially like Alien. Obviously not as good as Alien is fantastic, but it followed the same template. It was just a motley crew on board a ship with no other external resources, and they're being picked off one by one by a creature that they cannot find nor understand. And so I sort of went into so I came out of the movie, and that was my big takeaway from it. And then I sat down and was reading some stuff about it, and apparently that was the screenwriter's original concept. He was like, I just want to make this Alien on a ship, if I can.
That's funny, because we both kind of drew that, because I didn't read anything about that. It was just striking me that I'm watching Alien on a 18th or 19th century English vessel.
Right. And for that, I kind of appreciated it for what it was. I mean, I've seen some of the director's films already. Norwegian director Andre Orvedal, he's done some good stuff in the past. And there are some elements of the inevitable padding out of the story and characterization that I don't think it needed. I mean, yes, I understand why the one female character is there, and she's there more than anything else because they need a female character there. Otherwise,
right,
it's a bit of a sausage fest, and it gives her. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So it's balancing it out a little bit. The reason why she's on board makes perfect sense. She's essentially she's the packed lunch essentially.
Yeah. That's
in
the Ziploc bag.
Yeah, and also it gives the script an opportunity to give a bit of backstory about Dracula, because none of these characters know who he is, or it is, or why, or where he's come from. And she's like, "Oh, yes, I know exactly who this is, and what he's doing, and why I'm here, and all the rest of it." And so I think that by and large kind of worked. And I got to be honest, her fate. Did you get Midnight Mass vibes?
Oh,
from the ending. I was just like, oh yeah, they've seen Flanagan's work here for sure. And then Corey Hawkins as that, he's essentially the protagonist. He is the guy who only got on last minute, and he's a medic. He's a black man, and they acknowledge that, but I thought they kind of earned the way that they acknowledge it. It immediately casts him as the outsider amongst the crew, which I thought was quite interestingly handled. And then he's just like, oh yeah, well, this isn't the first time I've had to deal with this kind of crap.
Yeah, no, I thought, we talked about representation in films before, and I think we're going to chat a little bit more later about maybe the new South Park episode, but it all comes down to a lot of times of the way that it is woven into the DNA of the story.
Absolutely.
And if you can do it in a natural way, I think we're all supportive of it, and we need to see more representation. It's just when it's kind of crowbarred in artificially, it just
defies the logic of the setting or the period or whatever. And here, it's a motley crew of sailors in the Near East, and in the Mediterranean or wherever. They're likely to have hailed from all over and look different.
Sure.
Anyway, and then he's like, yes, and this is why. And yes, it was a problem, and this is kind of why I'm coming home, because I've basically been rejected from this educated position that I was qualified for, but when they saw me, they didn't like me. The one thing that I thought was kind of fascinating about his character was how they end the movie.
Okay,
because they end and they've kind of positioned him. He survives. He's in London, and he's kind of tracking on the trail of Dracula. Almost like a kind of Van Helsing. Kind of figure.
I was actually going through my head. Did they ever mention his name? Like for a minute, I kept thinking they did, but I thought, if they hadn't, it would be interesting if he signed his name and it was, Gabriel Van Helsing or something. Because that went through my mind as well. The other thing I thought was interesting in the film is at the beginning when they saved the kid. Remember the large trunk's going to land on him. I remember thinking, the one survivor, if there's anybody, it's going to be the kid. And of course, they turn that on its head and they totally kill the kid in like the worst way in the middle of the film. And it's like, not that I approve of the killing of the kid, but I thought, at least they didn't fall into a trope that I so quickly identified at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, no, it was one of two things where you're like, and because I know the guy's work as well, I was like, he's a legitimate kind of mainstream horror director, but he is, he has got proper horror chops. And when they killed the dog and the kid, I was like, okay, there aren't really any sort of studio compromises being made here. I was kind of like, okay, good, not good,
Yeah.
but good.
Yeah.
Nobody is safe, is what it tells you. When the dog dies straight away, and when the kid is like, horribly mutilated after that. So you know what? I mean, is it going to change the world? No. Is it my favorite Dracula retelling? Of course not. No, absolutely not. But I thought that the production design was good. I really got a feel for being on the ship, and I liked all of that. I felt the Dracula design actually was good, was strong. It didn't bother me. It didn't bother me that he didn't sort of take human form. It's like, why would he? He's there in survival mode. He's being a full-on predator. He's not trying to woo anybody or deceive anybody. He's just out to feed. So do it as animalistically as possible. So that all kind of worked for me.
Yeah, it didn't not work for me. I mean, I understand that's the lane that they wanted to go down. I just find it a less interesting lane than the Stephen Moffat one.
Oh, sure.
That's where
but then I think it's an unfair comparison.
Well, I mean, they're both telling the same story. It's just the way that they're choosing to tell it. So I think you can compare. They're both telling the story of the last voyage of the Demeter, more or less. One just engages it with, it's going to be through him in human form, weaving his way into society on the boat and killing them one at a time until it becomes very obvious. And that's what another thing I love about it, because he's so suave. It takes a while for them to realize that, oh, it's actually him who's the bad guy. And I love the mental gymnastics and the chess game that's going on. Whereas rather than the straightforward, let's just run from the demon that's running around the ship. And, the problem with the logic of this is they've got about 12 hours of daylight. I would have scoured that ship during those 12 hours. There's so many things you could have done, and just logic would dictate. And yet it seemed like every 5 minutes it was getting dark again. And I'm thinking, so anyhow, true. I think we've I didn't dislike it. I think on Letterboxd I gave it 2.5 out of 5. I enjoyed it to a point, but if I had to recommend anything similar to that, I would watch the 3-part Stephen Moffat Dracula on Netflix. I find it immensely, I find it rewatchable too, just because Moffat's dialogue and the way he engages. It's just, I love this Dracula because he is horrible, evil, witty, charming, amoral, just everything. And yeah, so.
Yeah, no, he is great. I do like Claes Bang. And Moffat's a Doctor Who guy, isn't he?
He is, and that's another of my little predispositions. Sure. So okay. My bias is revealed.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. So was there anything else you watched horror-wise for Halloween?
I got interrupted and I got to finish it. Have you seen His House on?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was really enjoying that, and I got interrupted. I've been meaning. I'm halfway through with that film.
Yes, that's well worth finishing. Again, it was a while ago I watched it. But yeah, it's kind of like British set immigrant story where sort of some of the horrors of their experience back home follow them into the UK, don't they? Into the new home.
Yeah, it was quite good.
Yeah, that was quite good. I mean, the other big thing I watched this Halloween, although we are actually recording this on Halloween, was Five Nights at Freddy's, which
did watch it. My son has been begging me to take him to see that, and I think at 12 years old, I don't think he's ready for this.
It's I'd be interesting. I don't think it's as unsuitable as it might be, because I think it's, if I remember rightly, it's fairly bloodless.
And that's one of the things. I'm taking a James Marsh. I like movies of people eating people, so I don't know if you're the best arbiter for what a 12-year-old.
Thank you very much.
But I'll check. I'll look into it.
I feel that young people are often given short thrift when it comes to what they can handle and what they can't handle. And I think, like anybody, a horror movie should test those limits. That's the point. That's the point of them. If it was all safe and perfectly suitable, what's the point of watching it? quite frankly.
Hey, the first time I saw Alien, James, is
well, there you go.
I was 7. I would have been younger than Ethan. I would have been 11 or 12 because I was 7th grade. And my younger brothers went too. And my dad waited until my mom went out of town on a weekend church retreat. As soon as mom was gone, he took us all to see Alien. And it was like, my love of cinema was, I think I'd already loved cinema at that point, but it was just like, wow, this is what stories are supposed to be.
Okay, now I don't think Five Nights at Freddy's is going to have that kind of give Ethan that kind of epiphany. But by the same token, listen to what you're saying. You know, I was way too young to see it when my mum went out of town. My dad I believe his mum is out of town right now. And you want Ethan to have those kind of stories as well.
Ooh.
So maybe if you're not sitting down, I mean, let's be honest, Five Nights at Freddy's isn't very good.
Okay,
I'll get that out right the way. But maybe you could use this as an opportunity to sit him down and show him something that's genuinely awesome, even if it might, freak him out a little bit. It's like great because then he'll be able to talk about it later. What I will say about Five Nights at Freddy's is it's done surprisingly well at the box office. I don't think anybody anticipated that. I mean, it has cachet because it's based on some video games,
right? Which
I've never played, but I watched a few what they called playthrough YouTube videos just to see what the game was and what it looked like and how the experience was. It looks like a really boring game, quite honestly. You know, you don't really kind of even move around very much, or you're just kind of sitting in a security office watching characters move around on CCTV. It looks pretty dull. The movie, for me, the biggest problem is that it was kind of preempted by Willy's Wonderland, which was this Nicolas Cage movie that came out a couple of years ago. And when that came out, everyone said, hey, you're just ripping off Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's true. And I'm not even sure how legally they got away with it because it is a blatant, just like rip-off of it. And that movie isn't very good either, but it does have Nicolas Cage in it. And it's one of those Nicolas Cage performances where he really shows up because he doesn't have any dialogue in the entire movie. He plays the main character who gets stuck in a small town, can't pay his car, he needs to get his car fixed, can't pay the bills, and they're like, well, there's one job, go to this old sort of amusement restaurant arcade thing, and if you spend the night there, then you'll get your
that is a blatant ripoff.
And he spends one night there, and this is obviously 5 nights, and there's far too much. One of the big problems with Five Nights at Freddy's, there's way too much plot. There's too much going on. Josh Hutcherson has got so much going on in his life that it distracts from the fact that he's just hanging out at essentially a haunted restaurant overnight where animatronic animals possessed by the ghosts of dead or murdered even children are traumatizing him or chasing him around the building. And that should be it. That should be enough. But there's all this other kind of stuff going on. It really kind of detracts from it. But yeah, if I remember rightly, I think it is fairly sanitized. I think it might be a sort of PG-13. I think it's fairly bloodless, fairly, not much sort of actual on-screen violence. It's more like threat and atmosphere. But it's also not very good.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll take him to see it though. He's been really wanting to see it. And
double check that. Check what I just said. Okay. But if he really wants to see it, then I don't see any harm in it.
Now, you haven't seen the new South Park yet, have you? Into the Panderverse?
I have not. If I'm completely honest, I don't think I've seen an episode of South Park for quite some time. However, I did just read a Hollywood Reporter article about it, so I feel I'm up to speed with what's the issue here.
Yeah, the zeitgeist of it.
But why don't you lay it out?
Well, yeah, the new episode, and like yourself, I tend to watch some of the highlighted South Park episodes, but I'm not a regular watcher, but I'm familiar with the characters. And obviously they're taking aim in this recent episode with kind of the direction that kind of Disney in specifically, but kind of Hollywood in general have gone, and kind of what we were mentioning earlier in this talk about maybe representation gone illogic in many ways, and maybe beloved franchises maybe suffering from bad decisions in an attempt to kind of come up to sensibilities of the 21st century that not everyone shares. And I know you get into heated water and people have really polarizing views on a number of these issues, but I have watched the episode and it is really funny. I mean, and I was shocked at how specifically they skewer Kathleen Kennedy and skewer Disney and skewer...
they call her out by name, apparently, don't
absolutely they? Yeah, and they really basically, and Cartwright at the beginning, Cartman, that's right. I was thinking Cartwright, right. I was thinking something else. Cartman, he is basically a transgendered Black woman, and all of his friends are strong women of varying races. Okay. And not realizing they're in a different, basically it's almost like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. There's different versions of them. And the regular Cartman's having these dreams where he's been gender flipped into basically what's happening with a lot of roles and remakes and reboots of various, some cases beloved franchises. So It really, in a nutshell, the episode really takes aim at this. And yet at the end of it, they really also call out the people on the kind of the anti-woke viral social media group that kind of will just tear into anything that they don't like if it doesn't measure up to the standard that they feel that the franchise or something that they love should measure up to or live up to. And so I found it surprisingly balanced. It wasn't kind of just a takedown of woke culture. And I'm hesitant to use that word because people that use it.
That's what they call it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and so
it's misappropriation. Ironically, it's misappropriation of those labels to criticize some kind of sort of diversity and reappropriation kind of thing, isn't it?
Right. That's right. So I thought it was done really funny. It's only Trey Parker and Matt Stone?
Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yeah. They're the creator of Book of Mormon, which is my second favorite musical of all time.
Yes, I have still not seen it, but I know it's in London these days, isn't it? So
funniest, it's the funniest thing you'll ever see.
Although I'm going to the UK later this month, but I'm not spending any time in London, unfortunately. But I'll get there at some point. I'll get to see it at some point. But I'm glad it is balanced because I'm as equally exasperated by both sides of this, to be honest. Yeah. Yes, Disney, and others, but Disney, might as well stick with them as that's what we're talking about, has gone completely overboard. It is a complete course correction, because for many years, they have been criticized, obviously, for many years, holding up these sort of unrealistic beauty standards and behavioral standards of what little girls ought to aspire to be and what they should, with all their princesses and all the rest of it. And all the Prince Charmings were just like sort of white. Well, everybody was just like a white guy, and there was very sort of token efforts to represent any other demographic. And then they got called out on that, and then they did such a hard kind of oversteer, course correction,
overcompensation
back into that. And at times, at times it defied logic. Like, I remember one of the ones that really did infuriate me was Beauty and the Beast, the live action Beauty and the Beast, where it was all just set in this little sort of small French town in the sort of 17th century or whatever, whenever it was set. And it was such a sort of diverse, like randomly diverse community of people that you're just like, well, this doesn't make any sense in any environment. You could have sort of, sprinkle in a few sort of, Black families or whatever it is you want to do. But they suddenly sort of did, it's like half the cast, but it was all like sort of mixed race relationships and families in ways that just defied logic within the historical setting of the piece. And of course, I know it's a fictional fairy tale, but you're like, this this is just ridiculous. This is just stupid. You've obviously just decided, okay, well, 40. Let's just recast 40% of the roles.
Yeah.
And you've done it with your eyes closed by the look of it.
Yeah.
And then obviously all the stuff that Pixar have done, which has resulted in a number of very, very successful and rewarding stories by giving content creators from other backgrounds the opportunity to tell their stories. But then it can get out of hand. And so I'm glad that they have sort of said, I'm glad that they're making fun of it, because nothing should be off the table, and you should be able to make fun of absolutely everything. It's just whether you're making a good joke or a bad joke. You should be allowed to make jokes about anything.
It is very funny. And
I will look it up, and I will find it, and I will watch it. But I'm glad that they're also taking umbrage with the other side of the argument, and with all the people because I get tired of all of that as well. There are a number of people doing sort of similar things to what we're doing, where all they do is just poke holes in all of this stuff all day long.
There's a huge audience for it. I mean, if we throw up on our thumbnail the casting of that girl Rachel Zegler for Snow White, we're going to get an extra few thousand hits, because there is an emotional trigger response. And if we just blast that, and I think you and I both, I'm not afraid to be controversial and to have my opinions, and I do think a lot of this has gone too far. I mean, I didn't like Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, and Kathleen Kennedy, I believe, has been blamed for screwing some of that up too. You and I disagreed, I think, a bit on that film, but I just felt they made Indiana Jones this schmuck, and the female has to be this strong. It's almost like that strong female character has become just a stereotype now. It's this.
Well, it's called a Mary Sue, I believe, is the name of that kind of character. It's like I believe that Mary Sue is a strong female character who comes prepackaged and fully formed as a kind of a capable, adept heroine with agency. And people have taken against that kind of character because, well, she hasn't learned anything, she doesn't, and you're like, well, yeah, but how many male characters arrive kind of fully formed and they're just good at stuff? It's like, well, a lot of them, but yeah, it's called like I believe it's called like a Mary Sue, and particularly when like the first of the new
I haven't
Star
heard that
Wars,
before.
Of the new Star Wars came out, people took they had huge issues with John Boyega being a black stormtrooper, and Ray, what's her name, Daisy Ridley, being, and she was like, that was the first time I heard the expression Mary Sue, is when they were talking about Ray in Star Wars. Is that because right from the beginning, as soon as she's introduced, she's good at stuff. Yeah. And so she doesn't need to learn, and she hasn't been on any kind of sort of developmental journey. It's like, well, yes, she does, but in other ways. And people were just getting infuriated with the fact that she could abseil, into the wreckage of a spaceship, like from the get-go. It's like, this is absurd. Girls can't abseil. They need to be shown how to do it by a man. And you're like, okay, well.
See, I had all kinds of problems with that Star Wars movie, and Daisy Ray was a minor issue in that for me. It was the whole idea of reuniting the original cast of Star Wars and not having Han Solo and Luke Skywalker share the screen together and fight together. I was just that for me is a mortal sin that cannot be forgiven.
The big problem for me was just that, why does every character of note have to be related to the bloody Skywalkers or one of the other families? Why can't they just be another person who happens to be good at stuff and important in the larger story? So it just drives me
because
crazy.
There was a lot of goofing around in the Skywalker family, man. It's like the Usher family. The Usher.
Well, I was going to get to this because, please, all you need to do is look at the comments section of our Fall of the House of Usher video to know that there are still some people out there, and people who watch at least one of our videos, who have really, really big problems with families, whether they are biological families or whether they have adopted or married into other ethnic groups. If they don't all look the same, they get very, very angry, and even more angry when they're called out about it. So So enjoy that.
I think you are married to an Chinese woman. I have a Filipino daughter. I think people could call us out if they wanted to. Our families are not homogenous ethnically.
No. Well, it's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah,
you love who you love, and that's all it should be.
Yeah, I do like how Mike Flanagan was able. You know, it's always creative how you bring representation into something. And in House of Usher, you've got Bruce Greenwood's character who is white, and he's going to have 6 kids, but Flanagan obviously doesn't want to have 6 white kids, so he has the women that he sleeps with on the side obviously come from different races.
Yeah.
So he slept with an Asian woman, a Middle Eastern woman, and a African American woman. And so he introduced his multi-ethnic cast just by the
by being
sexual preferences. So, yeah, which I thought was pretty creative, actually.
Yeah, it totally works.
Yeah. It worked better than the Midnight Club did.
Well, that was just like, you know, the United Colors of Benetton, where it was like, okay, we've got this group of sort of 8 children or whatever, and each one is representing a different ethnic group. And, you know, that feels forced.
That one, I think of anything he's done, that was the most, like that just does. I think in a previous film or review, we put a clip of Taika Waititi in, basically calling out that kind of representation where you say, okay, we're going to have 8 kids and they're all going to be different colors. Anybody who's grown up knows that is no neighborhood. That is no group of kids anywhere on the planet.
That might be what your class at school looks like, but that's not what the kids who hang out after school
hang out together.
Like.
But then he went on to say what real representation, because obviously Taika would be for that, but instead make a movie about Polynesians with Polynesian writers, you know, with Polynesian actors, and tell a Polynesian story. That's representation, not how many different colors can I put into a scene.
Absolutely. You know, it has to have a logical foundation, and if it does, then audiences, I think, will be willing to embrace the story, whoever is telling it.
Okay. Panderverse. Shoot.
Yeah, let's get off that soapbox. Okay, so another film that I did want to talk about that is out in Hong Kong cinemas right now is Cobweb. Now, that is not the American horror movie that came out earlier this year starring Lizzie Kaplan called Cobweb. This is the Korean period film industry drama, comedy, farce, melodrama, sort of period piece from Kim Ji-woon, starring Song Kang-ho, among others. Song Kang-ho, obviously, now, if not already, the most famous Korean actor.
I know who he is. I know who he is.
Well, even more than you know who he is, you can say his name correctly. So yes, the star of Parasite, of course, and many, many other films. Okay, so Kim Ji-woon
and Broker.
Yes,
one of my favorite movies last year.
That was, yes, you liked it more than I did.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that film.
It's clearly had a lasting impression on you.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm a little foreshadowing here. I enjoyed Broker more than I enjoyed Cobweb.
I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think that's fine. Okay, so what is Cobweb? Cobweb is because it's a far more difficult entry point, really. It is set in the 1970s. Song Kang-ho plays Kim Ki-yeol, who is a sort of celebrated film director who has been around for a while, and you know he's widely respected. But there's almost a suggestion that he's past his prime, and that he's becoming sort of self-indulgent, overindulgent, whatever. This is Korea in the 1970s, so it's still during the kind of sort of military authoritarian dictatorship where there is very, very heavy censorship, you know, and everything that is going into production in the Korean film industry has to be pre-approved by the state.
Safe to say, K-pop and K-drama did not manifest in Korea in the 70s.
They did not. Not. However, you know, there was cinema, and we'll get into that shortly. And director Kim has done rather well for himself. However, his most recent film, which is a sort of psychosexual melodrama about sort of adultery and crazy female characters, and one of whom has a sort of crippling fear of spiders. It's called Cobweb, and it is in the can. It's done already. He wants to go back in and reshoot the ending.
Yeah.
He says he's not happy with it. He wants to completely change the ending, and then it will become his masterpiece. This obviously causes all kinds of problems, not least for Chairwoman Baek, played by Jang Young Nam, who is head of the studio, because it will need to get pre-approved, and there's no way that it will get sort of or reapproved by the censors, and there's no way that that will happen. And he's like, "Oh, we'll be fine. We'll just get all the cast back together, and we'll shoot it for a day or two." And hilarious hijinks ensue. Essentially, you get it kind of takes on the form of one of these sort of behind the scenes backstage farces, almost like Noises Off or something like that, where you get the actors in, and you've got, you know, while Chairwoman Baek is out of town on a trip to Tokyo, he's like, right, we're going to do it all really, really quickly, and we're going to get everybody back in the studio with the help of the kind of the junior producer, who I think she's great. Her character,
I think she's my favorite character in this, next to Song Kang-ho.
Sure, and not least her jacket. That kind of leather, brown leather jacket thing that she wears is just phenomenal. You know, and it's just, you know, costume can really work because it's so eye-catching. She's obviously very cool young executive with aspirations to become an actress herself.
Yeah, I love how she gives him like the go-ahead, like, this is amazing. I've read it. Go for it. Just do it. And that was one of the things I enjoyed about this film, James, is the passion of an artist to have his vision established, to despite the odds. I'm going to, you know, there's a bit of a madness to his character, to director Kim's character, which anybody who's been involved in the creative process, you can kind of really start to get a tunnel vision, and you've got to see this vision through. And even if, you know, it costs you some relationships and costs you some, you're going to do this. And so there was definitely parts of this film that I thought were done really well. And
yeah, I mean, Song Kang-ho's character, director Kim, he has a touch of the tortured genius about
that's it. Yeah.
But it's also been pushed to a kind of sort of absurd level where arguably what he's doing is completely unnecessary, you know, and that you never get the impression, or at least I didn't, and that the film believes he's doing the right thing by going back and tinkering with his masterpiece.
Well, and he really reveals that because he lives under the shadow that everyone feels that the great movie that he did and the screenplay that went with it was written by the director that he'd worked with, who died tragically, and that he hadn't wrote this. Well,
and isn't he also the husband of the chairwoman of the studio? Wasn't it her?
Yes.
Which is how she inherited the studio.
Right. I think. And I think that's how it works. But I think
so, yeah.
But you're left with a question. This is a spoiler show. You're left with a question of, did he or did he not steal it? And then it's revealed at the end, yeah, he did steal it. And so a lot of his insecurities that kind of rile up in this. I mean, even at the beginning when he's kind of being mocked by some folk in the little cafe, they're saying, you're
critics.
washed
it's
up.
A group of critics, isn't
critics,
it? Having dinner.
And they're saying, you didn't really write that. He's like, I did write it. I did. And you're thinking, thou doth protest too much. And so at the end, it's going to reveal that, no, he did not write this.
Right. And that he is sort of living under the shadow of this former filmmaker called Shin, I believe, played by Jung Woo-sung, who's a really big actor as well, who died, in a fire. And then there's a fire in this movie too, towards the climax, you know, where they have to. There's a sequence that gets out of hand where they have to set the set on fire, and there are certain people trapped in certain rooms off stage that, you know, might end in tragedy. But you get the impression that Kim Ji-won, the director here, has poured something of his own insecurities into all of this as well. You know, he is a director. He's kind of the last of the big three Korean directors that we have talked about on this show, you know, who kind of really broke out as Korean cinema broke out internationally in the early 2000s. So you have Bong Joon-ho, of course, and you have Park Chan-wook, who did Old Boy and The Handmaid and movies like that, and then you have Kim Ji-woon, who's just as prolific, and he's one of those ones who's harder to pin down because he seems far more versatile, far more willing to try different genres, and so his best films are all over the map. You know, he's got A Tale of Two Sisters, which is an absolutely fantastic kind of gothic horror, supernatural horror movie, which I've mentioned to you, I think, in the past, is something that we might cover. He's also done one of the coolest sort of action revenge thrillers called A Bittersweet Life, starring Lee Byung-hun.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
And he's done sort of gangster movies. More recently, he's done sort of Japanese occupation spy thrillers, like Age of Shadows with Song Kang-ho. He's not, you know, so he's done all of these kind of different movies. And so this is another departure for him, you know, into new territory. And you get the impression that he's using this as a little bit of sort of self-administered therapy, if you like, to get out of some of his own insecurities. Now, there also apparently are very strong parallels between the fictional character of director Kim and a real sort of legendary filmmaker in Korea called Kim Ji-young, whose most famous film is arguably the big great Korean movie from like the early
60s,
called The Housemaid, which has been remade not too long ago. Now his leading lady of choice in a lot of his movies in like the 60s, and he did a lot of this kind of sort of psychosexual melodrama kind of stuff about sort of young, tempestuous, sexually motivated women at a time when you know, the family structure and dynamic had to be preserved by the censors above all else, you know, and so he was really kind of needling the censors with these kind of modern women and all of this kind of stuff. His leading lady of choice was Young Yoon-nam, who won the Oscar a couple of years ago. Remember old Korean lady who won Best Supporting Actress? A couple of years ago for Minari. She was in all of his movies back in like the 60s and 70s. She was really like his muse, his Gong Li, if you like, sort of to Zhang Yimou or something like that. And I've only seen one or two of those, and I've seen The Housemaid, and there's a few of them. I just want to do a quick plug, actually, while we're talking about this, because the Korean Film Archive has a YouTube channel where they are not only restoring their movies, but they're also just putting them all up for free on their YouTube channel with English subtitles. And there's a whole load of great stuff on there, and I should have prepared this and got the page open ahead of time. Korean classic film. Or it's just at Korean Film is the channel on YouTube, and there's a whole load of really great stuff on there. So that's all well worth checking out. And I came out of Cobweb just going, oh man, I need to watch more of those old movies on that YouTube channel, because it really kind of stoked the fires of those kind of like completely overwrought, visually super stylized melodramas from a sort of a bygone era that this movie gives you just enough of a sort of a tease of what they would be like.
There's melodrama mixed with a lot of farce in this film.
For sure, yes.
And I enjoyed that. I mean, I enjoyed the farce element. I thought there was some legitimate funny moments in this film that and I love the creative process. I love any movie that's about making movies. There's a great tradition in cinema of films about making films, and you know, Ed Wood being one of my favorites. You know,
and absolutely.
In fact, we need to review Ed Wood. That is one of my favorite films. That is one of my most rewatchable. Tim Burton. This is just one of the best.
I think it's probably Tim Burton's best movie, actually.
I would say either that or Big Fish. are my favorites. I really enjoyed Big Fish, but I think I probably would tip the scale towards Ed Wood. Ed Wood is just Johnny Depp at his pinnacle.
Absolutely.
Before he kind of fell
before he became
Martin
a
Landau,
parody of himself.
That's it. Unfortunately, Captain Jack both brought him into the stratosphere, and it kind of derailed his career by and large. And it's unfortunate.
It broke him.
But Ed Wood, you got Martin Landau too, and he got a very well-deserved supporting Oscar for that role as Bela Lugosi,
beating out Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction.
Yes,
which is where you get that famous shot of Samuel L. Jackson going shit, when he doesn't win. When everyone else is going, oh, well done, well done, well done. He's just going shit. Hey, we digress.
We digress.
So it was a really kind of sort of mixed bag. But I mean that in a kind of positive way. I think, yes, there are elements of melodrama. There are elements of sort of a historical drama about a very specific period in Korean history when things weren't great and life wasn't easy. And particularly if you were an artist, you were under all kinds of pressure, above and beyond sort of the normal pressures of making an expensive movie. It was very funny, particularly all the stuff involving sort of the young prima donna actress Yu Rim, who was like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be off making my Korean dramas," and then you find out she's pregnant, and all of that kind of stuff was, I thought, very funny. And then the movie that he's making as well, just evokes all of those old sort of 60s Korean movies, which I really need to watch more of.
I love that. My images of Korea are either rolled up in the Korean War, and so there's a lot of poverty and destitution, or as somebody who came out here in the 90s and it was one of the 4 Asian tigers and it was a modern metropolis. And it was great for me to kind of get a little peephole into that transitional time that Korea was in the 70s, where you can see in this where it was not yet the Asian tiger. There was heavy censorship of the arts. There was kind of a heaviness that seemed to hang over the set that I don't think we would see in subsequent years. And yet they obviously were quite a way removed from the Korean War and some of the ravages of that. And so this is one of the first times I've got to see Korea in the 70s and what maybe Korea would look like in, having grown up in the 70s myself, 70s and 80s, and seeing the contrasts between an America of the 70s and a Korea of the 70s.
Yeah, no, it's very different. I mean, kind of like Taiwan in that regard. The 80s was this incredibly sort of tumultuous decade where everything changed, huge regime change, democracy was instituted, and people were able to sort of shrug off decades of authoritarianism and really sort of express themselves for the first time, speak openly about their experiences for the first time. And so don't
say that so loud, though. Don't say that so loud.
Gotta be very careful. But yeah, so it is interesting. I mean, the 70s is still a period that Korean cinema likes to explore. So there have been a few films I've seen set during that period, but it's always sort of us against the system, and it's always about sort of pushing the little man down. And so I thought that this did it, but did it in quite sort of an artful, fun way where it's able to have a good time at the same time.
What did you make of that ending, though, with everybody up trapped in the spider webs?
Well, it's within the film, isn't it?
Yeah, it is within the film.
They come back and and this is sort of the ending that he wanted, right?
Oh, right.
I suppose. It's pretty ridiculous, isn't it? I think it's underscoring the fact.
I'm glad you were thinking the same way. I'm trying to think, am I missing something here?
Oh, I'm sure there is some great sort of metaphor to it all, but I think it's also just also suggesting that that yes, he's ruined his movie. And he's made an absolutely sort of ridiculous ending to something that was otherwise sort of pretty high quality. But if I gave it a moment's more thought, I'm sure there is some sort of maybe it's just about the frustrations of the artistic process, that you're always going to be left tied up in this unachievable quest for artistic perfection. Blah 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 blah. I don't know.
How many Cobwebs out of 5 would you give it?
I liked it quite a lot. I have to be honest. Did I like it more than Broker? I'm not going to put those two together because they're very, very different movie. But I liked it. You know, I did appreciate all the different things that were going on. Performances were great. Song Kang-ho, always great. Yeah. But as I mentioned, John Yo-bin, who's Mido, the young sort of idolizing executive who is just sort of completely enamored by it. I thought she was brilliant. You know, she really sort of jumped out at me. And
I had a bit of a crush on her. I'm going to be honest.
And I was just like, what have I seen her in? And I looked her up, and it turns out I've actually seen her in a bunch of other stuff. She's been around for a little while now. And so, she's definitely sort of on my radar now. I thought she was fantastic. So I'm going to give it 4, which is probably overly generous, but I don't do halves. And 3 is not enough.
Yeah.
Three feels it's like it's not going to attract any attention. And I want to sort of put a little
we're in the same ballpark, and because I can give half, I felt the same way. I want to give it more than 3, but I'm not ready to go 4. It's a 3.5 for me. I enjoyed it.
Excellent.
Didn't knock it out of the park, but it was an enjoyable, well-made film about making films, which I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for.
And it does tempt me. Not only you need to watch some more Kim Ji-yoon movies. We have talked about doing Tale of Two Sisters. I think A Bittersweet Life you'd get a real kick out of as well. But maybe even try an old Kim Ki-young movie. Let me see, because as I said, there's a whole stash of stuff on this YouTube channel. So it's very easy to find. And I'm going to have a look and see what Kim Ki-young movies are on there, because there might be one starring Yun Yu Nam. I feel like I'm saying her name wrong, but I haven't looked it up. Might just be a fascinating little interlude as part of our Asian Classics series.
Ooh, sounds good. As we're kind of drawing this to a close, James, I think it behooves us to just acknowledge the death of Matthew Perry, and just what an impact that has had. The accolades and the tributes are just flooding in, because I mean, although not this huge A-list star in Hollywood, he undoubtedly impacted a generation of not just Americans, but of people in the English-speaking world, and so myself included.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's impossible to overstate just how popular Friends was. You know, it ran for 10 years between 94 and 2004. And it was an absolute juggernaut. It was a behemoth. I'm trying to think of something that is comparable to it that's out now. I mean, there's so much more now, but it's almost something like Game of Thrones. It was like a show. I mean, obviously it's a completely different kind of show, but it was just the kind of show that everybody watched it. You know, it was on like, I mean, even in the UK, it was on, I think, at a slightly different time and slightly later than it was on in the US, but that was pre-internet. And so it didn't really matter. You know, spoilers wasn't really a thing unless the papers picked up like something about one of the weddings or something like that. Yeah. You know, it didn't matter that you were watching it sort of 6 months after it had screened in the UK or in the US or anything like that. But it was massive, and it was everywhere. During that period, I worked at Virgin Megastore, which is like a big sort of HMV or something, as a part-time job while I was at university. And there would always, particularly at Christmas time, be like massive just racks of Friends merchandise. You know, you'd have all the VHS tapes there of the latest series, but there would be just mugs and scarves and calendars, and they would sell like hotcakes every year after year after year. It was huge.
I think I posted on Facebook. There's probably no single show that has impacted Tammy and I together as a couple, right, with more laughter and joy than Friends. I mean, it is, like you said, you cannot underestimate or understate how massive this show was. And as I indicated in my Facebook post, we lived on Wellington Street, quite near Lang Kwai Fong, back in the 90s, and we would the Movieland store, the video store in Lang Kwai Fong. Back then, it was a 2-story. I mean, for Hong Kong, it was a mega store for Hong Kong size.
Yeah, I remember.
And they used to get the Friends VHS tapes in there. And so Tammy and I, when they get a new one in, we'd rent it. We'd go downstairs to Beirut's, order a bunch of Lebanese food, go back home, set out a picnic, and we would binge watch 4 episodes long before binging became a thing.
That's it. I remember each tape had 4 episodes on it, didn't it?
Yeah. We would get excited because you get to the end of an episode, and we now binging is a thing, but back then you waited every week for a new episode. And so the whole idea that when an episode ended and another one would start up automatically, it was like, this is heaven.
Oh yeah, this notion of having to like wait a week. I mean, I suppose some shows still play that way, but I mean, it's no surprise. Remember when a few years ago Netflix paid what, like $100 million for Friends, for the rights for Friends or something, and everyone was like, "That's ridiculous." And it's like, no, I completely get it. And then, I mean, then what happened was kind of slightly frustrating because it meant a whole younger generation went and watched it, and they kind of ripped it apart. In the same way that they kind of ripped apart all the old like James Bond movies and stuff when they became available. Because the problem with comedy, I'm not trying to explain something that's very obvious, is that it changes over time, and something that's acceptable 1 minute is unacceptable the next minute, and it moves in both directions.
Sure.
And I think the show, if you watch it through a 2023 lens, I think particularly homophobic jokes, I think were a big part of it. Not in any particularly egregious way, but it was just sort of a group of friends kind of just going, woohoo, that's a bit like this, that's a bit like that. I mean, you got to remember, this is very broad mainstream network television.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day.
So they would actually affirm gay characters, but you would never have any of those 6 be gay in the 90s.
Right. And there, and people complain that all 6 are white. And that,
but
really
again,
wasn't...
white people do hang out together, just like black people hang out together. And
I remember no one really called it out for that back in the day. I remember the big thing that the show used to get called out for again and again and again back in the day was they would never be able to afford those apartments.
That's what I remember. No way that these struggling, you got the waitress, you got the struggling actor, these huge New York apartments. And I think only David Schwimmer's character had like a real job.
Well, no, do you remember Matthew Perry, Chandler, worked in the city?
That's right.
But the running joke was no one knew what he did. No,
right.
It was something.
What does he
do?
What does Chandler do?
It was something in finance. Also, he was the one who had the best job.
He had the boss where the guy would smack him on the butt. Well done, bang. And he'd be like,
but it was a running joke that none of the others knew exactly what he did for a living.
Yeah. And Chandler, I mean, Matthew Perry was brilliant. He was that sarcastic, can you be more,
Well, he just had that, by the end, he just had that gesture, didn't he? He was just like, Well, they all just kind of did that to each other by the end. It was, it was one of those shows where they just, the characters kind of, it wasn't like they became the characters, like the characters became them. After a while, and I think the scripts just were molded around the actors, and they were such a formidable group as well. I mean, what I haven't seen, and I'm kind of surprised but not surprised at the same time, is last time I checked, or certainly within the first sort of 24 hours or so after, is that I didn't see any official comment from any of the other Friends cast.
They just came out.
I imagine they released like a joint statement or something.
Yeah, and Hollywood Reporter, and I think it's all the news feeds now. They're basically saying, "Listen, we're absolutely devastated, the 5 of us. We will speak more of this later, but for the time being, we just want to grieve. He was more than a friend; he was family, and so that the very appropriate statement was made.
But I mean, and he will always be Chandler Bing for sure.
Yes.
But was there anything else you saw him in that you particularly liked?
Absolutely. I was a huge fan, and I've rewatched the first season and only season of Studio 60 Live on the Sunset Strip.
I thought you might say that. Yeah.
And he and Bradford
Bradley Whitford from
West Wing, because it was an Aaron Sorkin show.
It was.
That show was so well written and so well done. It's a crime that it never did more than one season. But that one season, I think there's 22 episodes. In fact, it's due for a rewatch for me now. considering with his death. I love that show, and I recommend anybody, if you haven't seen it, even though it's only a single season, you get 22 of some of the best written episodes on TV.
Yes, I have heard of it, and again, that is a behind the scenes show, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
It maybe I will use this as an opportunity to watch it. I mean, obviously, as anybody who has spent any time listening to anything that we ever talk about, I haven't watched much TV at all in the grand scheme of things. I was aware of it, that it was an Aaron Sorkin show that bombed and got cancelled like immediately.
Yeah,
no one watched it, but everybody that did watch it said it was great. Both people who watched it loved it.
The funny thing is that that show came out the same time as 30 Rock. They both launched at the same time.
Okay. Well,
and everybody, and all the money was on the Aaron Sorkin show, not the Tina Fey show. In fact, there was even a commercial or Saturday Night Live episode where, it was Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin goes, "Oh, I'm so looking forward to working with Aaron Sorkin," and he's going, "You're not." I mean, it was a joke. It wasn't a gaffe. It was something they did. He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm so looking forward to my new show and working with Aaron Sorkin." And they're going, "You're in the other show." He goes, "What? Where's my agent?" The joke was, it was the Tina Fey show that was going to fail. Aaron Sorkin was a done deal. He'd just come off The West Wing. This was going to be his new West Wing,
because he left West Wing early, didn't he? He didn't
after like 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah.
Right. Maybe that's the thing to do, because I was already thinking, shall I rewatch Friends? Because I do like binge watching really crappy sitcoms.
Yeah.
Because I recently watched for the first time all of Big Bang Theory.
That's great.
Which was obviously a very mixed experience, but that was all shot on exactly the same stages as Friends.
Oh,
the one big thing I knew about Big Bang Theory was that it had kind of inherited the studio space. And you look at it and you're like, it's the 2 apartments across the hall, and the stairs, and it's all positioned very, very, very similarly, and it's just the same sets.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe actually this would be a more fruitful enterprise to finally watch Studio 60 rather than go back to Friends just yet.
Yeah. Very good. Well, James, I think I'm going to have to wrap this up. As great as this screenshot has been, I'm hearing people coming in and they're being very polite. So,
well, we can't have that.
Any Halloween plans tonight? I know you're not going to sit around in a costume and wait to give candy out.
I was going to just sit around in my. I'm not going to tell you what my costume. No, I don't have any Halloween related plans. I might put another horror movie on.
Yeah, I was trying to think if I do that. Yeah,
I watched a couple of old ones that I hadn't watched before over the weekend, but nothing that really leapt out. So I might stick on like an old favorite, but I haven't. But I've got so many, and I haven't decided yet. So
yeah,
which if I may ask very quickly before you go, out of all the big sort of slasher franchises, which is your favorite?
I'm not a big slasher franchise myself, or lover myself, but probably Nightmare on Elm Street, because I think the Freddy character is great. You know what else? Other movie, it's not as big a franchise, but I really enjoyed the movie, was Jeepers Creepers.
Oh, okay. Well, that's problematic for all kinds of reasons.
What? Pray tell.
Go Google
where they're on the bus. They're on the bus, and the kids. One thing I remember, it was great.
I think I only saw the first one. I remember it was really, the first half of that movie was really good. But then when you kind of sort of found out what was going on about halfway through, I thought it got very silly very quickly.
Okay.
But go Google the director of Jeepers Creepers, and you might want to cut this bit out.
Have a different thought? Okay. Yeah, I am going into this naive, but let's stick with Freddy.
Yeah, let's stick with Freddy. Freddy's got the charisma for sure. So I might end up watching a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but we'll see. There
you go. All right. Well, happy Halloween, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Let me know when you have Googled it.
Okay.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.